Morning, everybody. My name is Ryan T. Hinds. I'm really excited to be moderating this panel. But before we get to it, can we please have a round of applause for the indefatigable Jennifer Whitfield? I have a lot of gratitude for the work that you do in general, but especially with this panel. The title is interesting to me, Gender Experience in the Learning Environment. When I think about my gender experience in the learning environment when I was in theater school, it was definitely something that I didn't want to repeat or perpetuate when I was asked to be an educator myself. Which happened this past year. I taught my first class at Sheridan College. It was really exciting. So it was a musical theater vocal performance project. And in the first half of the year, the students learned how to be ensemble performers. And then in my class, the students learned how to be lead and supporting. So our process was we were rehearsing the musical Titanic. So with the students in the class, I cast the musical Titanic by Maury Yustin. In casting the show, I had an interesting opportunity to kind of put the idea of gender experience in the learning environment into practice through a wide range of non-traditional casting. We cast a female actor as the captain of the ship. We cast a non-binary actor as the owner of the ship. And throughout the whole show, there was a lot of actors who wouldn't necessarily get to play those roles in a full production. We really focused on the idea of power dynamics, the idea of class, the idea of fate and nature as is inherent to the story of Titanic. But in focusing on those stories, the questions of gender kind of became secondary. It wasn't about the captain was a man, so he has to be played by a man. It was what is the captain's status? What is the captain's purpose in the story? What is the captain doing? And so we came up with a really great take on Titanic. And we were snowed out on our last day. So just like happened with the actual nature got us in the end. Anyway, I'm an actor, director. I served a term and a half on the National Council of Canadian Actors Equity, during which time I was also vice president, working closely with Jen Whitmore. And that's a little bit about me. So I'd like to talk about our incredible panel here. And I'm going to do something that I always criticize my students for. Don't pull out your phone when you're speaking in front of people, but I guess I just did. So I have to do some learning on my own. Cole Alvis is a Turtle Mountain Métis artist based in Toronto with Chippewa, Irish, and English ancestors, pronouns she, her. She is one of the leaders of Lemon Tree Creations, Manidoons Collective, and Ad Hoc Assembly, and is on the board of the Dancers of Damala Hamid. Did I say that right? You got it. Okay. Cole has performed, directed, and toured queer and Indigenous performance across Turtle Island, including venues in Coast Salish Territory, Treaty 7 Territory, Robinson Superior, Treaty Territory, and Mi'kmaq Territory. Please welcome Cole Alvis. Kiara-Kumail. Kiara, they, she is a trans feminine actor, artist, and recent graduate of the TMU School of Performance. Congratulations. She recently performed in Andrew Kushner's workshop of the division here at Tarragon Theatre and Tori Keenan-Zelt's SEP in collaboration with Why Not Theatre. They are excited and simultaneously terrified to see what the post-grad world has to offer. That feeling never goes and bring more trans excellence to the screen and stage. Please welcome Kiara-Kumail. Neta J. Jones, they, them. That's what says Mr. Jones.
Jones?
Yeah. It's stage name.
No.
Jones, right? Like I'm not seeing things. Okay, there. Neta J Road. They them is a proud, queer, non-binary, Ashkenazi Jewish actor, artist, poet, and theater creator based in Toronto. A graduate of performance studies at U of T, Neta has multiple acting credits and will next be seen on stage across Canada, touring with Theatre of the Beat in I Love You and It Hurts. Neta's writing has recently been published in Salty Magazine and in the Pandemic Poetry Chapbook by Buddies in Bad Times. Please welcome Neta J. Rowe. And finally, August Winter, they, them, is a multidisciplinary artist with over 20 years of experience as an actor. Select credits include the Oscar Award-winning film, Women Talking. Mary Kills People, I love that show. Pretty Hard Cases, and an upcoming role of Orphan Black Echoes. August has been an acting coach for 7 years, teaching with LB Acting Studio and facilitating workshops through George Brown College and Toronto Film School. Please welcome August Winter. And finally, going to the live stream for a second, we were originally to have a fifth panelist who wasn't able to make it due to transit kerfuffles coming off of Vancouver Island. So Evelyn Gray should be here, unfortunately isn't, but is watching online. So can we have her a round of applause for her? So let's start with you. Cole and I have known each other for a long time through Lemon Tree Creations. Do you want to talk a little bit about the history of your work at Lemon Tree?
Sure. Tansei, y'all, nice to be here with you and this energy. Congrats on the beginning of this day and conference. Neta J Kundishkas, Waju Meitila, Waju Indujuba, Control Mountain area and Sunskru, and a Métis person here in Toronto, as you said. Lemon Tree Creations is a queer company that I run with Indra Gassani, and it has been running for over 12 years. Welcome.
Hi, come in. This is the theater where we can stop for people coming in. It's all right.
And it's queer mandated and works to tell stories through a queer lens. So we're often looking to platform queer, trans, and two-spirit folks wherever possible. And I'll hold it.
All right. Can you talk about some of the shows Lemon Tree has done?
Sure. Most recently, we just co-produced Lily's, the Michelle Martin Sharp play at Buddies in Bad Times Theater. We cast the show intentionally with Black and Indigenous artists to shine a light on the over-incarceration of these communities in Canada. They were also queer and two-spirit folks, and this was an opportunity to bring a queer Canadian classic to communities that are not often cast in those roles. And Ryan Hinds, our artistic associate, brought the piece to us and had an incredible turn in the show. And was something that we wanted to make sure that we were bringing a contemporary context, a context that was contemporary even at that time, but making sure to highlight when looking at romantic stories of prison, naming the colonialism that's ongoing and how that impacts particularly Black and Indigenous queer and non-queer communities.
What's cool for me about our production of Lily's also is Lily's has traditionally been seen as kind of like a white gay boy kind of play, if I was going to classify it in that way. And for us, it wasn't that. I'm really, really proud that of all the productions of Lilies that have happened all around the world for the years since it was written in the 80s, ours was the first to have a trans actor in one of the lead roles. And it was a really special project to be part of. So, yes. Kiara-Kumail, recently out of theater school. How you feeling?
Yeah, like my bio said, so we'll see. I'm like, oh, there are all these people who are just like their teachers. Oh, no. I think I had a complicated relationship with theater school, but I was definitely a part of the first group of people where things were starting to change a little bit. So people are now shifting into a more ethical way of teaching and not like the I'm gonna tell you what to do and you better do it my way. So I'm like very grateful that I was definitely part of that group, but I have had like a complicated experience, especially because I started my transition there and I'm still transitioning, but like I started from scratch. I was just like a gender fluid little kid, like who looked like a little boy, and you know, it was a complicated experience.
Yeah.
But
So something you've already talked, and I think is important to notice is like for a lot of people, the gender experience is it's a journey. It's not necessarily like a fixed. Now it's not like flipping a switch.
for sure. Like I've changed my pronouns a lot, and I know like, and that's something we can get into later, but that's definitely something that I noticed a shift in how I was treated as well. When I did present a little more binary, it became like easier for people to use she, her, which is fair. And I'm very comfortable and very happy with those pronouns. But I also would challenge especially cis teachers to explore talking to more trans people. There's this quote that I don't know who it's by, but they say like, to know a trans person is to love a trans person. So I think ultimately just like making new friends outside of that. Not like, I think the first trans person you meet should not be your students. I would challenge you to go out into spaces, Church Street, the 519, there's so many spaces where you can meet wonderful, lovely, incredible trans people who are willing to educate and talk to you so that your students don't have to do it for you. Yeah.
I would love to know, as you leave school and are headed out into the big world, what is the scariest thing for you, and what is the thing that you're most looking forward to or most excited by?
Booking roles and not booking roles. Yeah, it ultimately comes to that. I mean, like, you know, Laverne Cox was a big break in the barrier of what it meant to be a trans actor, and I was terrified, but like, going into acting school, she had broken that barrier, and now there are so many trans people, and I'm like auditioning a bunch, which is so like wonderful, because I never thought that that would be my experience. I thought I'd get like an audition maybe once, twice a year, and like I even came to Jen about this like anxiety. I'm like, Jen, I don't think I'm gonna get any jobs, and she was like, no girl. So I'm really grateful to like live in a world where things are starting to finally change, and I can see a future for myself. But like, I think acting is scary for everybody. Yeah. It is.
Neta, you.
Sorry, what's my last name?
I know what it is. We've had an Instagram group chat for the past little while, getting ready for this, and I actually wanted to ask you in the group chat: Is this your real last name? Is this what you want me to use now? But I am happy to know that it's not.
Rose is.
Yeah. You're about to tour in this show. How are you feeling about that as a gender experienced person?
as a person very experienced in having a gender, I'm really looking forward to it. I love touring. I love road trips. I have had the opportunity to tour to remote communities before. And this will be my first time going on tour since coming out as trans. And I don't know what that will be like. I am, as far as I know, the only trans person involved in the production. And I hope I'm wrong about that. That would be a nice thing to be wrong about. You know, I think there's an experience that a lot of particularly non-binary folks have, that I've referred to with friends who have a similar presentation as safe but sad, which is that if needed for safety, it is perfectly fine and perfectly easy not to disclose the fact that I am non-binary, and people will read me how they read me, and it is most likely that they will read me as a woman. I have a huge amount of privilege in terms of being a white, straight-sized, able-bodied person, and you know, the parts of my transition that are visible to the world can be read in multiple ways. And so for safety, it's really easy to just let people assume what they assume. I recently did a road trip, as I think I told you, down the east coast of the States with 2 other trans friends to Florida. We drove from Toronto down to Palm Beach and crossed through all sorts of places where trans folks are not welcome and not safe. And we all talked about this, having the privilege to just be assumed to be cis straight folks. It's good to have the privilege to be safe. It is not comfortable to be invisible. And so that is something that I'm thinking about on this tour, as we tour to, you know, to different parts of Canada. And it will be a conversation definitely that I'll be having with the team in terms of what safety might look like, but working on the assumption that I will probably be safe. I will probably be absolutely fine. What will it look like to ensure that I don't feel like I'm hiding the entire time? That is a different experience than somebody who is visibly trans, who is marginalized in other ways, who does not have the privilege to hide or be presumed to be cis. Yeah.
Do you know the itinerary at all? Can you tell us where we'll be going so we can tell our friends?
I
see you and support you.
Don't know yet exactly what our tour schedule is going to be. I know that that we're going to be in Kitchener-Waterloo at the end of September. But after that, we're taking off on the road and we're heading west. My assumption is we're heading anywhere we can between Winnipeg and Vancouver Island over the course of the month of October, and then coming back and doing quite a lot of Northern Ontario in November as well. Yeah, so I'll keep you posted about that.
Please do.
Yeah. Something else I want to say though
Yeah, go
about
ahead.
touring in rural communities, no, it's just that I catch myself making the assumption that the only safe places for queer trans folks are metropolitan centers, and that's absolutely not the truth. There are queer and trans people everywhere. Every single community you can possibly imagine, everywhere in the world, there are queer and trans people. Whether they are visible is another question, but they're there. And I want to catch my own metronormativity, as it's been termed, and assume that I'm probably going to encounter a whole bunch of wonderful people, queer and trans people, everywhere I go across Canada and everywhere I go in the world.
I'll share a story about that as quickly as I can. I was touring a very gay cabaret show in BC years and years ago, and I was playing a very rough bar, and I walked in and I was like, this is when my life ends tonight. I'm gonna walk on stage singing the trolley song. It's not gonna go well. So I did my show, and nobody was impressed. And afterwards, I was changing, and somebody knocked on the door, and I went and got it, and it was a guy who made me look small. And so I was like, here it comes Ryan, watch out. And he was like, when I was a kid, my mother sang me those songs and fully went through this emotional moment. And he was like, if you have any trouble out here in this part of town, this is my phone number, you call me, I have your back. And like, I could cry thinking about it, but it's the exact thing of like being careful about making assumptions, and then when you're in places like, things can surprise you out of nowhere like that. August, winter. Can we talk about the year that you've had? how's it all feel? How are you handling the journey of women talking?
Oh, well, I mean, first of all, it's just a privilege to have been a part of a story like that. I think on many different levels, getting to play a trans character is one level. In a film of that size that people are seeing, getting to tell that story, getting to work with those people, it's all just been a privilege to get to speak about these things and to learn through the process, because this was actually the first role I auditioned for after coming out. It was almost like the next day, and I'm not exaggerating. And so I had already internalized what this meant for me, but it was very soon after saying more professionally and to the people who support me, like, hey, this is where I want to move now. And so I was catching up during the whole process to what does this feel like to speak about, and how do I represent myself in this way, but also not like speak on behalf of other people's experiences. So it was on one hand just incredible, and on another I was navigating this, how do I talk about this without putting my own experience and being like almost the person who has the answers. I found myself in that situation a few times and wanting to be really clear about, I love talking about this, I'm very open, but I'm also learning and figuring out what's true and how to live in this way and honor everybody's experience. So it was a weird way to try to figure out how to do that with it being watched like that. But I mean, a gift at the same time, yeah.
I think it's interesting what you're saying, because so often identities are looked at as a monolith, and it's difficult to do that because we're all individuals. Everybody's on their own journey with their own experience at their own time. And not to make this too much of a talk show, you have a art coming up on Orphan Black. Do you want to talk about that at all, so we can all watch and support?
I mean, I don't know that I can talk very much about it, which is unfortunate, but I can speak a little bit actually about, in relation to all of this, I was playing a cisgender female character on that show. And so this is actually something that I'm finding really important to talk about right now, especially with non-binary folks. I think it can go for anybody though, but the line between what can I embody in this career, in this profession, what role can I take on? We are actors. I often get asked this a lot, well, you're just playing a character, can't you put on a dress, okay? This is problematic in many ways, which I can speak to more about. But we all have to figure out where the line is of, I can embody this different person's experience and still remain connected to who I am. And so this is something that partly I just loved the role. I'm really looking at the season itself is amazing. And so I was like, I love this role. I love who this person is. I can embody these characteristics and these qualities. And in my mind, in order to play it, I separated going into work. I actively was not viewing myself as a woman because I was playing this role. Now that does require extra work in terms of educating cast, crew about pronouns. Again, I can speak to that for a long time about navigating how to do that. But right now where I'm at, I'm finding I have to make these compromises in identity in order to do the work that I love. And that's something that I hope changes soon and continues to, because I'm in this situation a lot as I walk this line between how the world perceives me still, gender related, and who I am internally. And so that's just, I think, a really good example of how I'm still working right now, is it's not just non-binary and trans roles that I'm embodying. Yeah.
Great. All right, so I want to narrow the focus of the conversation just a little bit and bring it into the realm of education and educational experiences. Thinking back to your formative years, as a student, as learners, what were some of the ways that your gender experience in the classroom were either missed or affirmed at the time? And we'll start here, and then
Oh, sure. Well, I went to Ritter College in Alberta, and I took some private singing lessons, and I thought it would be great to bring in a song that that spoke to me and was something that I wanted to sing, and was advised that when I'm auditioning, because women tend to sing a song, it's not advisable. And so I was discouraged in that moment. And I've since learned that folks of all genders sing that song, just anyway. But so that was something that was challenging. I also was invited to play Juliet in a scene study. And I also was encouraged to bring parts of myself to the work. And so I would say, even though this was early 2000s that I was matriculating, there were some sparks of hope and progress within my faculty.
I went to musical theater school, Randolph College here in Toronto, and I had the same experience with bringing in songs and being told no, and not, this isn't for you, this isn't what you're supposed to do. And it was super frustrating because in so many ways, when you're an artist or when you're learning, nobody knows you better than yourself. And if a song speaks to you, for me at least, again, it's never because it's the big diva song. There's something in the lyrics that resonate with me. There's something in the music that resonates with me. So I think it's so important that when you're learning, to be encouraged to follow the thing that you're interested in, and be allowed to learn the song that you want to sing.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of negatives that come up for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's work through them. That's why we're here.
However, I also want to say some teachers have done a fantastic job. Like Lisa Karen Cox, who will speak later today, she is phenomenal, and what she did that I really appreciated was that when we were talking about an exercise where she wanted to play with gender a little bit, she pulled me off to the side. She didn't make it a big thing and talk to me in front of everybody, and she was like, so how do you feel about this, and how would you like to go around exploring it? Which I think all people should do with cis and trans people alike. You never know, some little gay boy who's closeted might want to be the most fabulous queen out there, and I think it's just asking people how that can help. There are some instances where, like I said, I was transitioning throughout, and initially I did only go by they them pronouns. Now I go by they she. And my friend Evelyn, who's not here today, we always have conversations about this, about, like you said earlier, about the cis conformity, safe but not comfortable, or not being seen. And I, in some ways, have the privilege to only be seen because I am just trans. But trying to default non-binary people to what you see them as doesn't necessarily help anyone. It doesn't make anyone feel comfortable. You're probably uncomfortable, fuck.
We can swear. It's all right. I think Pepper to the right and the other one.
Do it more often than you think. But I guess you just don't want to pigeonhole necessarily non-binary students, and I've been very lucky that now I do use she/her pronouns as well, and people respect my identity. I also will say that if we're swearing, I don't give a shit, and I will tell people if they disrespect my pronouns, kindly, of course. I'm not going to punch you in the face. But I remember when I was in first year, none of the students could necessarily get it right. Everyone was trying to figure it out. I'm often the first trans people meet. And I think that having a conversation with them, a frank conversation, was easy enough to finally get them to be like, okay, we've got it, and then they never misgendered me from that day on. So sometimes having a teacher to advocate for that can be super helpful. Or just correcting a student, because while you may think we may not notice it, and you want to move past it, I often do hear when you misgender me, and I will go away thinking about it. So just correcting it in a moment. You don't have to make it a big deal. Not saying sorry, I don't know. Just be like, they. And I'm pretty sure that person will feel okay. And if they feel uncomfortable, you can talk to them afterwards, and I think that will make them feel safer. Yeah, there's lots of things, but I'm gonna end there for now.
Okay, all right. We might circle back
Yeah.
because we have the time. Neta, for you, in your formative years and experience.
Yeah, so, you posed this question in the group chat to give us a chance to prep a little bit. And my first thought was, oh my God, I'm the wrong person for this panel. Because I only came into my gender identity as an adult. I came out as trans when I was 33. And so my formative years doing my arts training, I sure was a straight cis girl, wasn't I? And so I didn't initially know how to answer the question. And I was thinking back to the acting training that I had. I started very young. I was a child actor. My first agent at 8 years old. Went into a professional program at an arts high school. And then left the business for 12 years. And only came back in my 30s. And I was trying to remember, it's been a long time ago now. I was trying to think what might be useful. And it occurred to me that part of my difficulty in remembering what my early acting training was like is, yes, it was a long time ago now, but I was also very dissociated for a lot of those years, which I think is the experience of a lot of people who've, for whatever reason, not come into themselves yet. That there's a sense of not being all there, and that was absolutely my experience until my 30s, until recent years. Kiara-Kumail made such a wonderful point, which is that making sure that you have a gender-inclusive classroom is not just important for the out trans students in your class. It's important for everybody because it's very likely you have people in that class who are not yet out as trans or non-binary, who don't even know that they're trans and non-binary, and having the opportunity to explore gender through different roles, explore whatever, through the variety of roles that you have the opportunity to play in class, that might be huge for somebody. And it doesn't need to be a big deal. It doesn't need to be singling out the people who think, wow, this person really, I get the feeling that they might want to play a woman, they want to play a man. That's not your business to know, and they might not even know yet. And so to give everybody those opportunities benefits everybody in the class. I didn't go to a conservatory program. I trained at U of T, and I did a Bachelor of Arts there. But what I hear from so many friends who are in conservatory programs is this idea of we're preparing you for the industry, we're preparing you for the real world, and you have to know what your hit is, you have to know what these rooms are going to be like, and you have to be tough, and you have to be afraid. And I think that's bullshit. I think the most valuable thing a classroom can do is be your chance to explore. It is really valuable to know how casting is going to see you. It is really valuable to know what kind of roles you're most likely to get cast in. And when you're in a classroom, it's not a casting session. You have the opportunity to play all the roles that maybe you'll never get cast as, maybe you're not going to get cast as now, but maybe you will in the future, as you change, as the industry changes. So I think adopting generally more of a gender-neutral policy in a classroom setting is so, so valuable. When I was in school, when I was in high school in our arts program, I most often played old women. And I think that's a very familiar experience for so many non-binary and trans folks who are assigned female at birth, like myself. Because there's something about you that people can't pick up on. They're like, I don't get teenage girl from you, and I can't quite explain why. I think we're going to cast you as an old woman. Which was great. No regrets. There are people still out there who think there was an old German lady playing Fraulein Schneider in the 2005 Claude Watson production of Cabaret. 17 years old. Very nice one on TV. But yeah, you know, casting people according to the energy. I know it sounds really woo-woo, but I mean, like, if you're a director, you're an educator, you pick up on people's energy. That's part of your job. You know, as you talked about this production of Titanic, casting somebody who can play Status. Status is not inherently masculine, although we treat it as such in society.
I'll throw in as well, with Titanic, we were very fortunate in that I pulled some strings, and the composer and lyricist of Titanic, Maury Eston, was able to join us for our class. Also wrote like Nine and Grand Hotel and shows like that. And so when we were talking about who was playing what character, the actor who was playing the captain, he said, are the songs in a comfortable key for you? And she didn't want to say no, but she kind of went, what? And immediately he was like, so change the key, no problem. So if the creator of the piece has that attitude of freedom and flexibility with the work, why can't the rest of us? Why can't the rest of us see it in a new way? Yeah. August, formative times.
I echo what you said around disassociated, like living. I was a very vibrant kid. I also started at the age of 6 acting. That's all I've done. I mean, I've done other things in life, but it's been so formative to who I am that it became almost this, even in my training, it became this surface level identity instead of really understanding who I was. And I remember looking back, I was very lucky to have really supportive people and teachers, but I remember this feeling in general of it being very, very limited, that there wasn't choice, that there were qualities being fostered in me that I wasn't always comfortable with. And I couldn't put my finger on it at the time because I didn't have the awareness of who I am now. But this just lacking of choice and imagination and play, kind of this to what you were saying of, this is a classroom, and to me, the greatest gift of being educated or educating is meeting more of yourself and getting to stretch and expand and go, am I comfortable with this? I don't know, let me try it. Is this a safe enough space to do so? So I think the biggest thing that was lacking for me at the time was choice to explore, and also educators who were able to pick up the nuance that I was probably really, really uncomfortable. So nothing overtly was wrong, but there wasn't that same awareness that, and now the hopeful part of this that I think is growing, the awareness around how can we validate everybody's identity? How can we, as acting coaches and teachers, see every student that walks in that door? So that we can, whatever, we all have that, I don't like calling them strengths and weaknesses, but the places in us that hurt and the places in us that are really developed. It's a gift, as you know, playing make-believe in a sense, to be able to explore these things through roles. I'm basically repeating what you said beautifully, but that it's really been my experience as well, that to empower students to figure these things out for themselves, you have to give them choice. And you tell me, what do you want to do? What kind of roles excite you? How can we change this so that you're comfortable? Like, go out of your way and do a bit more work and like have fun and use your imagination. And that's what I find exciting now about teaching, is that, you know, honor people's identities, but, you know, challenge why gender has to come into the classroom at all right now, other than to respect people's identities, of course. So that's kind of where I'm, sitting with it right now.
Good. Question for everybody. Surprise question, but it's not intense. I'd like to know for all of you, what was the moment or the call that you felt called towards educating or called towards leading and guiding students or younger people? I'll answer first. For me, I come from a line of educators. My grandfather was a teacher and a principal. My mother was a teacher, and so for me, it was always kind of like, I know how to teach, but are people interested in what I have to teach? And then it kind of got to a point where like I looked at my own career and I was like, I've done a wide amount of roles, and I've done musicals and plays and dance shows and cabarets, and I think people could learn from something, could learn from my experiences. And I also thought about like my experience in training, and I was like, oh, maybe I can be the thing that I wish I had, or the kind of teacher that I wish I had at the time. So for all of you, jump in. Whoever wants to answer first can go. What was your call to education?
I'll go first.
I can jump in. I came to educating through facilitation, largely. I had the opportunity to run the Indigenous Performing Arts Alliance, which is the national arts service organization that advocates for Indigenous artists. At that point, I was working as an artistic associate at the Edinburgh Performing Arts. I was working with my mom and aunties in our reconnecting journey with Turtle Mountain, which is southern Manitoba and northern North Dakota. And it was early to be handed this coordinator position of this organization that that needed some support. And so I was able to, through strategic partnerships, including the National Arts Center, we were partnering with them on this study, which saw a lot of Indigenous artists gathering to speak about the Indigenous body of work. And so as the leader of this organization, I had the opportunity to be engaging with Indigenous artists across Turtle Island. And something about grappling with the culture and context that I'm still bringing myself to and the learning journey that I'm still on. One of the things that I was doing was decentering myself within that leadership role by spotlighting the local Indigenous leaders in these communities that we were going to. And so within the circles that we held, I was getting over my fear of public speaking and beginning to strategize with other leaders how to facilitate rooms. And so that turned into some training. I got to go to Art Equity in the US as an EDI training program. And so then I began facilitating circles, facilitating rooms, specifically around EDI with a focus on Indigenous sovereignty. And that turned into a gig at Brock University, where I was teaching an Indigenous theater history course. Maybe I'll go there.
I fell into teaching at first kind of unexpectedly. Where I've trained, they asked me whether I wanted to start teaching, and I was like, yeah. I think the first calling for me was nothing delights me more than seeing somebody, as I said before, explore and find something new about themselves through being an actor. I think that's part of the magic of what we do. But then I kind of assessed why I do this thing when I came out about 3 years ago, and noticed as soon as you find something in yourself, you see it everywhere in the world. And when I was in classrooms teaching, I was feeling my own limitations starting to go, what? Do I need to do it this way? Like, is this right? Is this helping people? And I started to really question, was I using what I could offer in the best way. I also saw a huge gap for a space for trans and non-binary actors and artists to train and to learn that felt safe. I don't believe in separating trans and non-binary artists and actors from cisgendered actors, but what I was noticing and getting feedback about was that so much brain space and energy gets taken up by being in spaces that don't feel safe, that you're being seen. So I created a separate class for folks who are gender diverse. And it's been one of the most fulfilling experiences for me to see these artists get to do what they love without the distraction of working through first these layers of am I going to be seen and respected. So I would love to see this, merge so that everybody can. I want everybody to learn from everyone. But right now, what's inspiring me to keep teaching is just there aren't enough spaces that feel like, yeah, let's get down to the work of why you're here instead of the distraction of your identity. Yeah.
I started teaching by chance. Also, so I had this big sort of early quarter-life crisis at 18 when I decided not to be an actor, not to go to theatre school as had always been planned. And then at 21 I moved to Scotland because I was 21 and didn't know what I was doing with my life. And I lived in a remote village in the Northwest Highlands that had a really vibrant arts community, but not a lot of theatre. Tons of music, tons of dance, literary community, visual art. And I was approached by a singing teacher who heard that I had a background in drama. I was 21, and she wanted to start, a singing and acting school in the village, because at that point, all these fabulously artistic kids from the surrounding region were commuting on a Sunday morning 60 miles to our nearest city to do singing and acting at a Stagecoach franchise program that they had there. And the singing teacher who lived in the village was also commuting 60 miles to teach singing at that program. She goes, this is ridiculous. Why are we paying for the gas and paying this franchise when we can have it here? And she asked me if I wanted to be the drama teacher in the program. And I said, I'm 21 and I have so much confidence that I have nerves. So yes, and I taught there for 2 years until my visa expired and I moved back to Canada, and that program is still running now, almost 15 years later. I have a 100% record of coaching to get kids into theatre school because I coached 3 kids and they all got in. It was such a fabulous experience, to the point that when my visa expired and I returned to Canada, this whole part of my late teens and early 20s had been about figuring out what the heck I was going to do rather than being an actor. And I said, well, perfect, I'm going to be a drama teacher. That's it, I found my thing. And then it took another sort of cycle of living life to realize that was not the path for me. It's particularly that being a teacher in the school system is very different than being a coach, an educator, a facilitator. And so I sort of had the opposite path of what Cole was expressing, where she came to teaching through facilitation. I came to facilitation and coaching through teaching. And in the later part of my 20s, as I moved back into acting, back into being a theatre artist, a lot of that came through facilitation. So before I went back to acting, I got involved with a community engaged theatre company, community engaged arts company, and started touring, facilitating community arts programs, facilitating storytelling projects. And I'll echo what Audie said, it was and continues to be incredibly gratifying to help people tell their stories and explore and play. And it's not as big a part of my practice now because it took me over a decade to find my way back to acting, and now that I'm back, I just want to focus on it. But it's a joy, yeah. And I think so many of you in this room who are educators and coaches, you're doing it's such important work. Giving people the opportunity to play, to explore, to train, and to build.
Kiara-Kumail, name down.
That's huge. teach. I don't teach, but thank you for all of the incredible work that you do. Maybe I'll teach one day, maybe not. We'll see what life has in store.
If anybody needs a teacher, over here, over here. Getting more specific, in your own practices as educators, what are some of the specific ways that you make your space safe and supportive? Is there anything that you can share with the people here?
That's somebody who's currently in it.
Sure, I'll jump in. So I was an artist in residence at McMaster University recently, and that came about through some advocacy, I'll say, on some of the faculty there. And what feels important to reference is I was invited there to work on my craft, which I was doing, but then also support their fall major production. And so I was co-directing and co-creating this piece that was looking at colonialism and inviting the students to engage with colonialism from their perspective. We were able to work with, there was one Indigenous student who joined us and another from York University that was there through some kind of class exchange. We were able to have a few Indigenous artists present as students. And then we also got to collaborate with Castanea Williams, who's a Mohawk spoken word artist based in Six Nations. And so at McMaster, Rayanne Chartrand's a Métis curator at the art gallery there, and is also a teacher of Indigenous visual arts history course. And one of the things that Rayanne was speaking about is a challenge when it comes to introducing the theory and critical analysis around Indigenous art when there's so little context, particularly coming out of high school. I think this is a second-year course that Rayanne's teaching. When I was there working with the fall major production, that was students from multiple years. And so through this advocacy, Peter Cockett is one of the teachers that was making it possible for me to be an artist in residence there. We, with Rayanne, collaborated on the creation of a new course that's providing a foundation that has Indigenous sovereignty at its center, and just had its first year of first years take it recently. And so Rayanne and I were able to regroup with Peter. Peter's now teaching that course moving into next year. And this is specifically addressing what Rayanne's needing to do at the beginning of her course before we can even start talking about the art, before we can even really get to the curriculum. There's a base level context that's missing. So I'm bringing that into this gender experience panel to name the ways in which Two-Spirit culture has always been here, and the impact of colonialism, specifically binary, specifically patriarchy. These are things that are foreign to these lands, and continue to afflict all of us today. And so this is, I hope, a success story of, I had met Peter and Melinda Goff at a gender and classical text workshop that we did at Stratford years previously. And through that relationship, and then my engagement as an artist, I think we're moving towards what could be some systemic change at the university. And it's not just hiring one person, it's a multi-year relationship that has a bigger vision. The previous teacher of the course that Rayanne and I supported the building of was very grateful for the context and the wealth of information there, and I think was maybe a little overwhelmed by it. So Peter is stepping in for this course moving forward so as to keep it going. And he speaks about that as a commitment that he's made to us to move towards systemic change. And so I guess I can wrap this up by saying it's long work, and it requires advocacy within the faculty. They just happened to be creating these new courses, and so there was an opportunity, there was a window to bring this in. And yet we're even finding that, of course, that course is also looking at multiple other experiences, and the material that we created from an Indigenous sovereignty lens is enough for its own course. And so there's still work to be done, but I think it's important to be looking at this much more deeply than any one particular teacher or any one particular course.
Well said. Yeah. I would just echo that, first of all, that there's no quick fix to any of this. There's not one thing you can do, band-aid the situation to make your classes feel safer. It's really questioning our assumptions always of why, I don't want to use the word normalizing in terms of not having this be an issue, because it is at a fundamental level, but getting to the point where everybody's experience of gender is present and we're seeing it, and we're not questioning why someone is in a certain role. So it is long work. That's the first thing I want to say. I would say more specifically, as an acting teacher right now, I'm trying to find ways, and this is maybe more on an admin side, but to lift the onus off of each individual student of holding responsibility of advocating for their own gender and identity. I can just speak for myself. I find it still to this day, even though I'm really comfortable with who I am, I find it uncomfortable to have to be the one to go, hey, could you? So what I think could be really helpful, and some places are really doing this already, of you have new enrollment, if new students are coming in, just put it on the sheet, you know, the way that you list your address, put your pronouns, and that helps for every single person, so that nobody's feeling singled out. I will always share my pronouns at the start of the class, but I never ask people to do so. So I try to walk this line between please share, I want to know, I want to see you, but never going around and saying, can you, because that can also create a feeling of discomfort. So those are things, practices I try to do when I'm just opening a space and meeting new people. And that I'm also very clear up front. I find people really like clear boundaries and clarity. I say at the beginning of a round of classes, let's say, that my practice is to assign scenes and roles that don't always align with your gender identity. I'm very clear about that, so that they know that I am seeing a quality in them that I think you would love this scene, like let's work on this. So that no one is interpreting it as me steering anybody in a certain direction, whether you're cisgender or not. And so I think being really clear up front about this is the way that I work, this is what we're doing, and if you have any discomfort about a role that's been given to you, talk to me, change the pronouns. Again, this is a learning environment. We have the luxury of being able to do these things, so why not? So the two biggest tools I'm using right now are, being upfront with everybody about how I work, and then just trying to build in more of that, an easier way to share than the vulnerability of who I am, just to meeting people. You know, it's a hard thing because it's a fundamental part of who people are, and we need to know these things. But it also can be very private, and so trying to find that balance as educators, I think, is really important. Yeah.
I love that. Just saying, like, the brush up, like the clarity, the transparency, the boundaries from the top of the class, that's so valuable, and to assign teams that way, like, that is really nice. And I feel like that leads to people feeling seen rather than assigned.
Yes, yes, yeah.
One thing that I'll add to that, it's become relatively common practice now at the start of a rehearsal process or at the start of a new class to create some kind of room agreement or have a quick discussion about what our values and principles are in the room. And when I'm facilitating, the thing that I will always include in that is apologize well. You don't know what you don't know. You're gonna screw up. Everybody's gonna screw up. The question is, what do you do when that happens? And do you make it about you? As Kiara-Kumail said, when you screw up somebody's front, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm trying, but it's so hard and so complicated. And I'm
the performative apology.
Yeah. Which and I'm sure is so well intended, but who's an apology for? It's for the person who's been harmed or made uncomfortable. So it's about an acknowledgement of harm or discomfort caused. It's about accountability, and it's about moving forward and just doing better once you know.
I think actually something to add to that is that apologize well is so great. I've been really loving it, even in my own world. I mess up all the time, and I think saying thank you for telling. Don't say sorry. Say thank you. Move on. Do the immediate correction. I think it's so validating if I correct someone and they immediately say thank you for telling me. That is that is the biggest gift you could give me versus the whole rigmarole of now everybody's sorry and it's just a waste of energy. Let's move on. Thank you is a really powerful 2 words. Yes.
I mean, ultimately, it will change from person to person, right?
Yeah.
Some people like the sorries.
That's true. Yeah.
So I guess it's not like a monolithic response and nobody ever knows what to do. I guess the question is, are you apologizing to make yourself feel better, or are you apologizing to help the trans person feel better who you misgendered? I mean, it happens, cis people misgender other cis people all the time. So it's really learning how to navigate that carefully and checking in without making it about yourself. Yeah, I do want to talk about something you said earlier as well about the goals. I find it very interesting, just from a student perspective. I have seen, my teachers see me, but when guest artists often come in to direct a show or something, I often see, and I have a very talented class. These actors are wonderful, incredible, and I've learned so much from them. But I often see that directors or artists project their own ideas of gender onto plays, like you said, and can often not see a trans person who isn't written already as trans in the play in a lead role. I'm not saying I'm the best actor, but I don't think I'm the worst. I would hope. So I think just having the imagination to see beyond the gender lines. There was something you talked about having just not seeing it necessarily. I mean seeing it, but moving past it, and I would actually challenge that you bring your own biases and explain them and show that this is my experience and this is what I'm going to do. If I was directing a play, for instance, I would probably put a trans woman as the lead. That is my experience, that is my bias. But if there are other people there, I would want them to challenge my bias. So I guess something that I really appreciate in teachers is when they listen to their students and allow us to challenge their biases. And they're wonderful teachers who are so willing to learn, and that's all you can ask for. Yeah.
I am aware, and I've seen a lot of people love to do a check-in, but then don't do a check-out at the end. And I think that's super important. You kind of want to close the circle and finish the conversation for the day. That is something I find helpful. So we are going to throw to audience questions in just a minute, so start thinking about some things you'd like to ask these folks. But my last formal question for everybody is, how can schools, institutions, training programs, et cetera, assist you in the work, in this work? How can they assist and support the aims of what we are trying to do?
We're
all so polite.
I think I know like budgets are small, but paying like educators to come in to explain things to you, it's a world where we're living in that's becoming more inclusive, and having other educators come in so that the onus is not on the student would be so helpful. Or pay the student to teach you. I mean, I'll take money out of it. It really is like super labor intensive, and I've been asked before I was playing a woman who was found in the woods, and the teacher had asked me, do you want this character to be trans? And in my mind, all my characters are trans unless they're pregnant or otherwise. And so I said yes, and then she basically told me, okay, go ahead and now teach your scene partner about what it would mean to see a naked woman in the woods who is transgender, and he's probably not, and I had to go on my own and have that conversation with him, and I was like, okay, well, you might want to murder me? I don't know, like, it was such an uncomfortable experience to go through that alone, and definitely like with conversations about intimacy direction, I think that like gender can also come into play with that, because I should not have had to explain that. That should have been something that someone was paid to teach why that was necessarily not okay. And she wasn't around for these conversations, but it does become difficult when you ask someone to explain their lived experience, because often the default is white, straight, cisgender, and those people don't have to explain themselves. I do have to explain myself. And then I also have to coddle someone if they make an offensive comment about, and yeah, another thing, sorry, I keep coming back to the whole like gender expression and like intention. I prefer that not everything be about my transness. I am a human being with so many multiple like factors and wonderful quirks about me and horrible quirks about me too. And I wish that some of the teachers would have seen me as a more complex being beyond my transness. And I think that's so important, especially growing up. I mean, like, I did transition in university, so I understand the need to hold on to me while I'm growing and like be proud of me, and that's so amazing. But I'm in a place where I'm so comfortable with myself that I don't need to talk about it anymore. Again, unless I'm getting paid for it.
Yeah, I would just say to maybe add to that, I've seen in the industry as well and in classrooms, like a lot of people innocently so maybe think the solution is to write more trans roles, cast, in a student in a classroom who is trans, give them the trans role, and that is a certain level of visibility. But I think what you're maybe saying is to have that, to be seen as a human in that space, instead of just putting another label, another box kind of essentially around what you can and cannot play based on who you are. I guess the other thing similar to what you just said, why it's so important to bring in educators is because, I don't know about you, but I find that if I'm in an interaction with a student that I haven't experienced before, and I don't know how to deal with it, I will often take the safe route. And if it's my own shame, or if something's happening around it and I feel uncomfortable, I end up not exploring that further. And so I think to bring in people where you have the space without the students there, where you can really ask, where you can question yourself, where you can practice. I had a really interesting, honest, vulnerable person take one of my workshops once that needed help practicing the pronouns, and that's like admitting that and saying that out loud, like, of course, like, find a way to do that. And so I think that's the biggest thing we can help with institutions, is giving us all the groundwork and the framework so that when we're in there, when we're teaching, when we're working, we're not also trying to figure out how to best handle the situation. Yeah, I would just add that.
I never want to make trans experience all about bathrooms, but I have to pee really badly right now, and it's going to be a bummer to go to the women's washroom. And so that is a tangible, concrete infrastructure thing that every institution can do. Oh my God, just have gender-neutral bathrooms with stalls that go all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom. It's great. Everybody can use them. Nobody can see you, and you don't have to have that awkward moment of choosing which washroom to go into. Yeah, I would go back to that question of choosing roles, assigning roles. Obviously there are perks and pitfalls of any approach. What I like about the approach that August articulated is that it's based on a student's qualities as opposed to their gender, and I think that there's something really exciting and really expansive about knowing that everybody has within them, masculine and feminine tendencies, decoupling gendered assumptions from the kinds of traits that we might be looking for in a character. Again, status is not inherently masculine. Cole was talking beautifully before about the fact that binary genders are an imposed European colonial Christian hegemonic idea that was brought to this land, and so many cultures have a history of expansive genders. As Ryan mentioned in my bio, I am Jewish, and Talmudic Judaism recognizes 6 genders on a spectrum, including intersex genders. And the first time I was ever brought in to audition for a male role, I had been really nervous to submit for it. I don't identify as a man, and I know I'm not going to be perceived as a man, and I don't have a desire to be perceived as a man. The reason I was excited about this particular role is it was a Jewish man, and a particular kind of Jewish man, and that was a type of masculinity that resonated with me, and that I think is actually quite close to how I feel about my own gender, and whatever masculinity I might possess is really embodied by a certain type of Ashkenazi Jewish masculinity. So exciting to audition for that role. I'm so nervous, and I don't normally get nervous for auditions. I love auditioning, but walking into that room and seeing the cis men sitting there, I just thought, what am I doing here? Like, as this just token that this director has brought me in because I submitted, it's good visibility to bring in some trans folks, and it was the most gratifying experience to audition for this role. I was good for it, and I was right for it, and it was within the realm of what I can do as an actor, and part of that is exploring all the ways masculinity can look, exploring all the ways femininity can look, decoupling from whether you are a man, a woman, a non-binary person of any presentation. We have these shades within us, and non-Christian, non-European cultures have been able to articulate these shades and continue to be able to articulate these shades. And there's huge opportunity in casting and in casting for scenes in classes to be able to explore that for everybody, cis and trans. So thinking more about what is it that is inherent in a certain role, or that's possible, maybe not inherent, but possible in a certain role, in a certain scene, and then what an individual actor can bring to that. It makes for much more exciting work.
Cole, last word?
Throw to questions.
Well, I guess what I would add to what I was already saying about systemic change and relationship building and the long work that is would be the specificity. I get to, I've met this two-spirit artist from Turtle Mountain, Chippewa Nation in North Dakota, and they have both Michif, the Métis language, and Anishinaabemowin, the Chippewa language. And so I've been looking for the word for two-spirit in Michif, the Métis language, and because we're a post-contact nation, when the binary was here, likely, or so far, I have not come across the word for this. And so a two-spirit elder was encouraging me to look through the First Nations ancestry that I have. So Anishinaabemowin, Awana Kishik is the artist who's put out a list on Instagram of multiple Ojibwe traditional gender terms. And so Ikwidwadaza is half the nature of a woman, which resonates with me, as well as Bakani and Adaza, which is other, but with a positive connotation. And so on this sort of infographic that Awana Kishik made, there's, I guess, a spectrum of a binary, but with these terms, creating more of that spectrum. And so I think, yeah, leaning into the specificity of these things.
All right, questions. Put your hand up high.
I've learned a new term today, cisgender. Have you heard of that before, so thank you. I understand the context of your conversation what it means, but I think it's an acronym, yes? Or, because when I hear cis, I think sister, and I'm thinking, oh, that's not what it means. So, SIS?
CIS.
CIS, is that an acronym?
It is not.
Then what does that CIS mean?
It's a Latin prefix, I believe, same as trans, which means across. So across gender is our experience being across in some way from the genders we were assigned at birth. And cis, I don't know, is anybody better Latin than I am? I think it just means in line with.
On the same
Or
side.
same side. Yes, thank you, yeah.
Organic
Yeah.
chemistry term.
Sorry?
It's like a chemistry term.
Oh, is it
Yes.
chemistry?
Cis and trans molecules, and cis are on the same side,
Okay.
trans are on the opposite side.
Thank you.
Dr. J.
And chemistry.
Doctor in the house, everyone.
It's all science.
Yeah.
Great question and great answer for sure. Anybody else?
Take it.
Plaid and hat.
Yes, hi. Okay, let me see if I can articulate this question. Oh dear. It strikes me that, August, I think you were talking about like the luxury of like in a classroom getting to explore outside of the complications of like who's getting paid to be seen as this character. And I guess, yeah, I think sometimes people struggle to go, oh, you're an actor, so you're like Brad Pitt, right? And it's like, well, there's these levels, and it's like what Hollywood is doing versus what, like, you know, certain community theaters are doing, and then what's happening in the classroom. And I wonder, I guess, in terms of room agreements or where we draw a line or what the boundary is around what are we the conversation seems to be like, who is given access to these roles professionally? But in a classroom context, well, we can sort of do whatever we want, like whatever dialect you want, whatever gender you want. But that does seem a little complicated as someone who's facilitating a room, creating that understanding or that agreement or understanding like, well, this is not the professional job. Am I coming across with any kind of clarity? I'm just wondering what the agreement is or what the conversation is around that line that's crossed. Now we're in a classroom and that's a different thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead, jump in.
I would challenge that, like, as young artists especially, we are the ones who are going to create the future industry. So therefore creating a different classroom will create a different industry. So being able to like make a safe environment where trans people, where gender necessarily might not matter, and that could be your own pedagogy and how you decide to lead is the way you decide to teach your class. But definitely, like, if you look beyond gender lines, then actors will go out there and advocate for themselves beyond gender lines. They will, like a cis female might just end up going for a male role just because, regardless of if the breakdown says it. And that will just challenge casting directors, because casting directors will be like, what is going on right now? But it's helpful to create a different industry that we want to see.
And I think, in terms of musical theater at least, I think that tide is already starting. I can think of like Alexander Billings playing Madame Morrible in Wicked. I can think of Lena Hall playing Hedwig in Hedwig and the Angry Inch. It does seem like the seeds of that change are starting to flower, and in a few years, when it's a full garden, it's going to be great.
Yeah, I would just really quickly add to that, similar to what you were saying of the ripple effect. I think it's really valuable to address it, that it is not yet at the point where a classroom, a safe classroom space is going to feel like it does when you step on set. It does not, I'll tell you that. But I think a really important thing to keep doing what you're doing and help students learn how to advocate, keep themselves safe. How do you talk to your agent? Like, this is something no one's talking about, is how do you communicate to your agent so they can communicate to casting on your behalf? It's this whole chain. So starting to build in, if you're really helping actors access more of the industry, language around how you speak for yourself and helping other people who are helping you. know how to do the same thing. Yeah.
Great question, thank you. Did we answer? Did we?
Yes, it feels like I could talk for an hour about it, but that's, yes,
Good.
good start.
See you in the lobby.
Yes.
A quick question for August. You mentioned, I'm trying to remember the exact words, but you said sometimes, or in the beginning, you would talk to an actor and you would take the safe route. And I didn't know what the safe route was.
I think I was just meaning in any context, gender or otherwise, if I ran into a situation in life where I hadn't seen it before or I hadn't experienced it, I would tend to either not speak up, not ask a question to clarify. So in relation, like specifically to gender, I would mean instead of asking the student, what are your pronouns, or I would tend to veer on the safe side, or how would I have better dealt with that? You know, that's a question that you can't ask a student. So I think what I was meaning there is creating spaces where you can actually ask the really uncomfortable questions of like, this will admit that I don't know something, versus in the moment having to have that exchange with a student that's not their responsibility. Does that
So
clarify?
playing it safe or going the safe side was actually kind of the choice of avoiding the issue, avoiding direct question.
Maybe. I think it more so in that way of not wanting my own lack of awareness to offend. So needing to educate myself more instead of using that experience as a way to figure it out. And so again, back to why these things are so important, getting out ahead of it, so that you're not having to shy away from something in the moment. Because I don't think that's the answer. I just know I've done that in the past instead of using that as an experience to learn, because that's not ever what it should be. You should do that first. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Red, sure.
I was taking a script writing class, and we were all asked to state our gender, which I found annoying for me, because I am a cisgender person, and I was saying, well, gender is not an issue for me. So do I have a right to get annoyed? I mean,
I don't think you should be forced to disclose that, but I think definitely understanding those and like why were you annoyed and like understanding that might help. I don't know.
I know because we need to be looked at as individuals. If I'm,
For sure. I guess you didn't want to be pigeonholed as a cis woman.
No, it would just don't look at everybody the same way. Like we're all individuals. This person might be transitioning. This person may be,
For sure.
you know, cisgender or gay or and we're all happy with. You know what I'm trying to say? We're all different people.
Like an equal playing field. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would maybe just on the other side of that something, because I completely hear that, and maybe asking people can sometimes be an attempt to make other people in the space more comfortable.
Yes.
So I would in that situation go, okay, I don't need to disclose this if I don't want to. That's 100% every individual's choice. But I would hold awareness around this could help someone else not feel singled out. I would just add that, yeah.
And I mean, being asked to disclose your gender, that seems wild to me. Whereas talking about pronouns, that allows you to speak respectfully to and about everybody in the room. What I think August pointed out that was really valuable is the best way to do that often is for the instructor, the coach, the facilitator, to just start by introducing themselves with their pronouns. You're likely going to be talking about your teacher. That gives you the language, like just technically speaking, it gives you the part of speech you need to talk about your teacher. But additionally, then the teacher models for the rest of the classroom that you can give your pronouns and that they will be respected. And if anybody doesn't want to do that, that's fine. Now, what I would say, if anybody doesn't give their pronouns, the easy thing to do is assume, oh, well, they're cisgender, and therefore I will refer to them by he, she, whichever seems to align most with my perception of them. If somebody doesn't give their pronouns, use their name. Don't assume their gender. they haven't given pronouns, don't use pronouns. Pronoun just means he, she, it's just a correct speech. If somebody hasn't given their pronouns, just refer to them by their name. Ryan said this, did you notice when Ryan did that? It's just the structure of the language that we're working with in an English speaking class.
I think it's the difference between, if you're leading a group or facilitating or teaching, there's a difference between asking or making everybody state their pronoun and inviting people to share their pronoun.
Absolutely.
I think the leaning on the side of invitation is a helpful place to be.
Yeah.
We weren't invited, it was just say your pronouns.
I think it's important to consider that annoyance that you feel about that activity in comparison with what it's like for others to be continually misgendered.
Yes.
And so when we go around the circle and we share our pronouns, it's an opportunity for us to correctly identify our peers in our community.
Yes.
Hi. So one thing that I'm encountering is just how quickly language is changing. And the resource that I'm using, I can't remember now, is GLAD, has a website where if I'm like, what are we doing now? I just go to it and just will like try to, because it's changing. Like when we first started talking about it, we would ask people what their preferred pronouns were. And that was the language for a time, whereas now you've taken out preferred because it's, do you know what I mean? So just kind of like even how you ask somebody one-on-one, you know, like what are your pronouns can sound quite, do you know what I mean? Like everything's tone, obviously, but it's finding gentle ways to be like, how do you want to be? Like I stumble all the time. I'm like, so I'm referring to people as they, kind of across the board in class. Even if I know their pronouns, just to kind of stick with one lane and just be like, because I'm forgetting things all the time, right? So, but in terms of how to ask somebody one-on-one, you know, and the fact that language does keep changing, is there something that you can suggest or point people towards to kind of keep up with how stuff is changing? Because it's not a monolith. There isn't one thing, and it is one-on-one. But do you know what I mean?
I do. I think my offer of that would be humility and persistence, whether that's who you choose to follow on Twitter or whatever. Like as things evolve quickly, it requires a certain level of showing up and thank you and moving forward. Preferred pronouns makes it sound like it's a preference and there's something kind of light or frivolous about that, as opposed to it being this is how I will live. This is how I will feel respected. And so yeah, I led with humility, I think, because we will continue to move towards a more inclusive space, and that will require shifts. And then that will require parts where I will make mistakes, and thank you, and just wanting to honor when someone does take you aside to say, hey, I felt this way, or just so you know, that's a gift, and that's a sign of respect from that person to say, I value you. And so that's where I think the gratitude or the apology, whatever is necessary.
Yeah, I would say humility is such an important first step in all of this, I think. A phrase that feels okay to me right now, and again, really just speaking for me, is what pronouns would you like me to use? That language feels good right now for me. I would also just say though, please weigh in, anybody, if you have different thoughts on this. I tend to steer educators away from using they, them across the board. I agree with using names if you do not know someone's pronouns. I think what I feel, and I've talked to a few other non-binary folks about this, is that they, them can actually hold a really important identity and way of feeling seen. And as with she, her, he, him, for trans folks or cisgendered folks. So I lean towards, if I know somebody's pronouns, I really work to use them. And if I don't, I use their name. So that's I would just offer that, and please, if you feel differently, but I don't tend to use they, them as a general statement. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I agree. That's what I think. I think, you know, they, them, I'm a language and grammar nerd, so I'll say like the way they as a first person, a third person neutral pronoun works in English is it's when you don't know, can't assume, or there is not a gender for the person to whom you're referring. Who's at the door, I don't know if they went away. And so if you don't know, if you're talking about a person who you don't know personally, you've never heard their pronouns, you don't want to make any assumption, and maybe it's getting very awkward to only use their name when you're speaking about them, that is a time that I think it is perfectly valuable to use they. However, if you know, have known at one point and have forgotten, that's the time to do the work. Ask again. And if it feels awkward to ask again, great. Come at it with humility. I'm so sorry, I know you told me already. Would you please remind me, because I want to refer to you correctly, I want to respect you. It's such a good question, Sandra.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it.
It is.
And you know, pronouns are the things that come up over and over and over again, and I think more than anything in an acting class, because it is one of the rare environments where we're talking about people in the third person right in front of them when we're giving credits. And so it is so important. And the other thing I would say that Kiara-Kumail brought up earlier is don't let your students be the first trans people in your life. There is a power differential there, especially if you're teaching in schools. I mean, less so if you're coaching in a studio, but you know, your students are paying money to be in the class. Asking them an open-hearted question is one thing. Putting the onus on them to educate you is not. You know, and I think this is the case when we're trying to learn anything in terms of inclusion. There are people whom you can ask without putting a burden on them, and there are people for whom it will be a burden. And know who the people are in your life who want to do that work with you because they are invested in you the same way you're invested in them. People with whom you've built a relationship, you've taken that time. There is implicit trust and respect over time. Those are the people with whom you can have those hard conversations. And if you don't already have that implicit trust and respect and relationship, pay them. Because you're asking them to do work. Yeah, but I think that is a very different thing than just open-heartedly asking an honest question in a respectful way.
This is going to be our last question. Go ahead.
I don't want to take the last question if anybody else has something.
I saw a hand up there, but maybe we could do two if they're
It
Yes,
might be similar because we're very
Who knows, maybe it's going to be the same question.
It might be.
After you.
It's actually a question I think that I've chatted about with August before, just sitting in the kitchen at work. But the work and a lot of the conversation today has been about opening up conversation, opening up spaces for conversations that haven't been had historically. My question is sort of a flip side to that, because a lot of the work that we do can be very personal, can be very cathartic, can be deeply psychological, can be therapeutic, and that is a hot topic word that can open up a can of worms. I'm wondering how, not just as educators, but maybe from the standpoint of a student as well, are there conversations that you find come up that the classroom is not a space for that, and how do you address those boundaries?
I'll really quickly weigh on it and then I'll pass it down, but I always find that it's helpful, especially, you know, we do very vulnerable work, and it's very important to keep that in mind, that you're working with a human. And I always, for me, try to steer anything that feels personal, because it's not my business. It's not my business. That boundary is really important. You all know this. If it's starting to veer into that territory, I always steer it back to the work, the context of the script. I ask questions if it's not towards the person's life and what they're starting to maybe unpack, and I bring it back to this script, this work. And then I will, if I need to, say, this isn't a conversation I can have with you. I hear you. This is really important. So those are the two things I try to hold. Hearing and seeing what this person is being vulnerable about, but knowing that's not my particular place. I'm helping them learn how to be an artist. Yeah.
I hear and see this conversation should continue for a lot longer, but we are at time. So thank you for being an incredible audience. Thank you to our panelists.
Why this stuff is important. You have 15 minutes to get to your next class.